Hello and welcome to Get Out the Bet. We're the show with all you need to know about betting on politics. Well, and if you are, you're probably in Europe somewhere because it's not exactly allowed in the US just yet, although we do understand there's a little window of opportunity in Ontario. I'm your host, Melissa Caen. I'm a journalist and I'm a political analyst. I'm here, as always, with our betting experts, Paul Krishnamurty from politicalgambler.com and Paul Everson, who is a senior reporter from VegasInsider. Now, today we're going to talk about the obvious thing. We're going to talk about the election, what we know, where the markets were right, where it was wrong, and how we're going to move forward. But before we get going, and for you gamblers out there waiting to collect your money, I do want to take a minute to tell you about what you can expect with regard to timing. For international viewers, listeners, especially, it seems very strange at how long it takes for the US to count its ballots. And the first thing you need to know is that's because all of our elections are done locally, like hyper locally. In California, for example, San Francisco County uses different voting machines than LA County, even though we both have to comply with certain state rules. So it can get down to the county level. And so you're talking about methods of counting, voting machines, and also different places in the process for people to object and say, hey, I think that this is wrong. And you got to sort of overcome that before you certify the votes. Now, the second thing you should know is that there is a hard deadline here of January 3rd, 2023, which I know sounds like 100 years from now, but be that as it, I know that seems crazy, but whatever is going on in any of the states and any of these places, they do need to sort it by January 3rd, because that's actually when the prior elections offices end and the new offices begin. There's no holding over in American politics. If on January 3rd, your state has not certified a senator, you just do not have a senator starting on January 3rd. No state wants that. So you can definitely be sure that states are going to be moving really, really fast as best they can to make sure they at least know who their congresspeople and their senators are by that date. Also, state laws vary between the states, but they have their own built-in deadlines. For example, in Nevada, the fourth Thursday in November is their deadline, and I think that's Thanksgiving actually. But each state's got its internal deadline, and then we've got this big deadline of January 3rd. So for what it's worth, those are kind of the outside of what you can expect as we go forward. All right, I'm going to stop talking because I want to hear from folks like Paul, who actually did bet. And as we talked about last time, he got Fetterman at a deal, I think 38%. And as we've discussed prior to coming on this recording, drinks are on him next time we get together because we know he made some cash. Paul, tell us about how your bets went and or not.
Yeah, generally very good because Fetterman, I also backed Laura Kelly in Kansas, which hasn't won yet, but I think it's going to. I'm quite confident that has won. And on the Democrats beating 200 seats, that's a big one for me on the House of Representative markets because the betting went really one-sided there, went up to like 70%, 65% for the Republicans to win 236, 199 or better, which I thought was too short. So that went well. The Senate market, yeah, they're going to be okay. I'm going to make a small profit, but I switched my position so many times over the last few months that it might end up cancelling each other. Everything might end up mostly cancelling each other out because I certainly didn't expect the Democrats to win Nevada as they are favourites to, although we don't know yet, 100%. And I didn't expect Georgia, which may go either way yet, but it looks probably more like we're going to see 51 seats for the Democrats, I think, after this. Do we agree?
Well, I mean, is Nevada? I think Nevada is leaning toward the Republican right now. It looks like we've got, at least I'm on the New York Times, it's 47% to 50% in favor of Adam Laxalt.
See, at the moment, the betting favours the Democrats strongly there. They're assuming that the Vegas vote will go heavily enough for Cortez Masto, but I don't know. It's above my pay grade to tell you the.
No, that's fair to say. I think that county that and Patrick, I'd love to get your thoughts on that. That Clark County, they're only 78% reporting so far. So I think, to your point, the bet is that those remaining votes are going to be for the Democrats in those races. What's your sense of it, Patrick?
Well, I think we'll see. I mean, Paul follows John Ralston pretty closely. I follow him a little. He's certainly been here forever, and he's got a huge knowledge base here. And he noted, throughout much of the daylight hours yesterday, that the election day turnout was, or the numbers, he kept updating them on his Twitter feed. They certainly weren't favorable numbers for the Democrats. So we'll see. Generally, Clark County is a Democrat stronghold. I mean, this has become a blue state because of Clark County and the Culinary Workers Union, among others, and so forth. So I could see why the betting odds would trend that way. We'll see how it goes. I think, Melissa, to your point at the top, yes, it's as others, as people who are outside of the United States listen to this and think, okay, why isn't this all done? This is kind of how it goes sometimes. But to that end, and we'll get more into this later, I think, as we talk about some of the some more of the races and how things shook down last night, and really the look ahead to 2024. Whether you lean left or right or somewhere in the middle or somewhere way out on the fringes, I think Florida's election model is absolutely perfect. They get votes counted day of, and they give you a result day of. And any state that wants to have voters feel like the election is completely on the up and up should be following a model that gets votes counted and results out there as quickly as possible. If it's not election day, I get it. Stuff happens. But if you don't want voters feeling like there's opportunities for things to maybe not be on the up and up, drag it out a month. But if you want voters to feel confident in the system, the faster you turn things around, whatever they're doing in Florida. I mean, they got 2 time zones there too, and they turn this stuff around. So I don't know what they do with the early ballots, what they do with the late count, the election day vote, and so forth. But they don't mess around. You get a result, and the next day you go to work and you forget about the election. You're done. Here in Nevada, we're going to be sitting here for a while.
Well, it's a good point about Florida, and the big headlines that I'm seeing everywhere today are sort of that this is a big DeSantis win and maybe a big loss for Donald Trump and his backed candidates. What do you make of either side of that equation? Whether DeSantis comes out of this looking like he sort of pulled off, and to be fair, it didn't seem to me that this was a close race for him, but the idea being that he helped make sure that the other Republicans in his state also did well, and that being the source of his victory in this election.
Well, sure. I mean, he helped Republicans in his state do well, and he took a late little tour of upstate New York, and that's probably going to be the difference between the Republicans getting the House and not getting the House. So, as Paul alluded to, this was a good night for DeSantis, and a better night than people expected. He it's what this might do, and I can't stress the word might enough, because Donald Trump sucks up so much oxygen in the room, but it might help the GOP see the light for 2024. Just DeSantis ran and won in a rout, pulled Marco Rubio along with him, a whole bunch of the rest of Florida along with him. Trump's chosen candidates did not fare nearly that well. So if you're already looking at 2024 from a betting perspective, and I know Paul is for sure, and others too, and you think Trump is going to suck up all the oxygen, well, last night gave you a good roadmap for how you should bet on 2024 then, because I think it could play out similarly if there are similar players on the playing field.
Well, Paul, you noted, I think, in our pre-show notes that the odds for Donald Trump actually did change.
Dramatic on that front, because as soon as that news came out that he was going to declare, his price crashed it rose from 20% to 31% earlier on this week, which is insanely short for this stage, really, for anybody to be that price. And then now, as a result of last night, you've got DeSantis has gone up from 17% to 28%, and Trump is down to 18%, lower than he was before even this news about him running emerged. So, yeah, absolutely, betting market's a very clear signal for DeSantis, who's also favourite for the nomination now.
Are there any
47%?
Are there any big embarrassments for the betting markets? Like, where did the betting markets get things really wrong? Or maybe they sniffed things out before the polls did in other races. Tell us what your thoughts are there.
I think that's a positive, actually, that I think the betting markets did sniff things out in other races before the polls, definitely, no question about that. But in terms of the overall results, to be honest, compared to most elections I can remember, this is a fairly ordinary night for betting markets because, this is working on the assumption that the signals are all right now and the Democrats are going to retain the House. If the Democrats retain the House, that was a 30% underdog going in. So they got that wrong, the main market. Plus a few key states, Pennsylvania, wrong way around, again, Nevada was heavily Republican in the betting. And Wisconsin governor's race was another one that went quite strongly Republican in the betting at the end, but Tony Evers managed to eke that out. So, I mean, the favourites do have an amazing rate of return in politics. But I've seen other ones that were better. I think in 2020 there was only one state wrong amongst the 50.
What about Senate control? I mean, that seems to be the thing up in the air right now, and it's interesting when looking at the numbers. And I encourage our viewers, our listeners, to not just look at sort of who's winning and who's losing. You really should try to compare the numbers between the races and check out two things. Number one, what we call an undervote, and that is when someone casts a ballot, but they skip a certain race because they don't like either candidate, right? That tells you there's a personality problem, right? It's not an ideology problem. I just don't like this person, even though I feel like I could vote for a different person of this party. This is a personal issue, right? So that undervote's going to tell you that. Also, when you see a spike in a third party's popularity in a certain election, which isn't to say that certain people don't just want to vote for the third party person, but it is to say if your libertarians are getting, say, 7% across the board in various elections, and then one race has a big jump of, say, 15%, that tells you that voters were looking for an off-ramp. Probably, unless that libertarian candidate just happened to be really amazing. But those are the kinds of things that you should be looking for. And when you look at, for example, in Pennsylvania, when you look at the number of people who cast their ballots for the Republican for governor, and then you look at the number of people who cast their ballots for Dr. Oz, the delta is about 250,000 votes. That's 250,000 people who somehow managed to vote for a Republican for governor, but just couldn't bring themselves to vote for Dr. Oz. And some of them voted for Fetterman, some of them voted for a third party candidate, some of them skipped. Not that many, actually, but some of them did skip. But that's how you can tell this is a personality issue versus a party issue. Same thing happened in Georgia. If you look at Kemp, he got around 200,000 more votes than Walker at this stage. And these tallies are changing all the time, but that's a big number of people who were happy to vote for a Republican. They just couldn't bring themselves to vote for Herschel Walker. And those are the kinds of things that indicate that certain celebrity candidates backed by Donald Trump are not going to be necessarily in the party's best interest.
Completely agree. Herschel Walker, it really stands out how badly he's underperformed compared to Kemp. And Trump himself, because if you in fact look at the two presidential elections, he underscored the Republican share in the House vote on the same day. There has always been a percentage, maybe it's 3%, 5% of Republican voters who won't vote for him, right? And this cuts to what we're saying about 2024. They would be mad to go with Trump. Trump, not only does he have a major problem getting more than 46, 47% of people to vote for him in any situation, but he drives the other side to the polls to oppose him, right? And Paul Ryan said a couple of weeks ago that we're certainties to win the presidency as long as we're represented by anyone other than Trump.
Well, there is this question. I mean,
So
if
this
the
is-
Georgia Senate
this
race
is-
goes into a runoff, and if in the meantime, I mean, Donald Trump said he's got a big announcement to make, if he announces before or around the time of this runoff date, there are certain folks who are saying, hey, this is not going to be good for Walker because, to your point, it's actually going to drive turnout on the other side. What are your thoughts on whether or not Donald Trump should make the announcement before or after a potential runoff? We're making a lot of assumptions here, but go with me.
I would say, I mean, like if Trump was thinking for the good of the Republican Party, he'd definitely leave us until next year. But Trump thinks for Trump. We know what he's going to do. I was surprised he didn't declare in the middle of the results last night. Steal the show.
The cameras are rolling.
Mm.
What about you, Patrick? Did you have any big surprises? Anything that really took you off guard that you didn't see coming?
I don't know that anything took me off guard that I didn't see coming. First off, whether it's political betting or just how politics plays out in the United States, I'm a fan of gridlock because I think that, without even knowing it, every single day, a whole bunch of people in this country break a law without even knowing it because there are so many laws and so many regulations and they pile up so much stuff. So gridlock is awesome in my book. You've got to build some consensus to get something passed, which is how it should be. So I'm hopeful that the House holds up. And from there, whatever happens with the Senate happens. Obviously, you're not changing anything in the White House or reorganizing anything in the White House for 2 years. And to Paul's point, this could keep Biden in the race. If this had gone the way some people had anticipated yesterday, there was a lot of postmortems saying, okay, the hammer's going to come down and they're going to make sure that Biden doesn't run in 2024. Well, maybe that doesn't happen now. So, but like I said, I'm a fan of gridlock. So if we get gridlock out of this, I'm good with it. There are enough laws, there are enough regulations, there's enough bureaucracy and all that for all of us to stomach from now till eternity. So if it happens to be a little tied up for the next 24 months, I don't have an issue with that. I think, with the way that the debate went in Pennsylvania with Oz and Fetterman, I did think Oz was going to find a way through there. But again, to Paul's point, this is what DeSantis does that some of the other candidates, such as the Pennsylvania governor candidate, did not, and that's get their people across the finish line. It didn't even come close to happening the way I think they expected it in Pennsylvania based on all the hullabaloo after the debate. So maybe that was a little bit of a surprise. I'm not as surprised. And if you've been listening to this podcast for the last few weeks since we got started, you shouldn't be surprised if you listen to Melissa about what may happen in Georgia, because it looks like it's going to a runoff. And she actually, I believe in episode 1, you predicted that was an absolute possibility. So I don't know if that was a betting option, Paul, but if anybody got on it, well, good on them to say this is going to a runoff. That would have been a great prop bet.
It's a great call, absolutely. And Melissa also called a couple of good Senate races, really good Senate upset. New York 17, Maloney losing, the head of the DCC.
House, yeah.
That's probably the biggest upset in all the House races. Oh, sorry, apart from the one amazing upset that might happen, the 100-1 shot, Lauren Boebert losing. Mm-hmm. She's 2% down. With 10%, looks that way. But yeah, no, you called New York 17 right, and also the other one, Oregon 05.
Oh right, yeah, the Oregon
not
governor.
Done yet. Yeah, and the fifth district, that looks like that's going Republican as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, kind of surprising. I mean, I saw there was an op-ed written by a local newspaper in Colorado, urging voters to not vote for Lauren Boebert, and it was so remarkable in its language that it was actually circulated among a bunch of my friends and I, that people were forwarding it to me, going, "You got to see this." It was really something. And I wasn't sure if that kind of, you never know what of those things breaks through. And I don't know if it had anything to do with the election results, but it seems pretty amazing that someone who has gotten so much attention is now not winning and might not win re-election in her district. That would be, to your point, Paul, really, really interesting. One other race that I thought was really surprising is Arizona. I really thought it would be closer. It has not been as close as I thought it would be. And so for those of you at home, and this may be a betting strategy, although I don't know if I'm allowed to give you that kind of advice. Here's how to call an election. I will tell you, having had to call elections without the benefit of a room full of nerds somewhere running computer simulations. Here it is. And I don't have any little poem to help you remember these numbers, so you're just going to have to write them down. So here we go. If you have about 50% of the votes counted and one candidate is 10 points or more ahead, that is your answer. Because the chances that those remaining 50% of the votes are going to vary so much from the 50% that have already come in that they are going to overcome a 10-point lead is very, very, very small. And so if there's a moment when the votes come in that you can see that 50% of the votes have been counted and yet the race has not been called, so maybe you can still get somewhat better odds, you can bet that it will eventually be the case that they're going to call this race. This happened last night in Ohio with J.D. Vance. I thought it could have been called way earlier than it did. They waited until something like 84% of the votes were in. Anyway, so if 50% of votes are in and somebody's up by 10 points or more, that is your answer. If 70% of the votes or more are counted and in, and somebody's up by 5 points or more, that is also a race you can pretty much call, because the chances that remaining amount of votes are going to be so off, so sort of out of the norm from the 70% that have already come in is very, very, very small. Not impossible, of course, but in terms of what you are seeing and what you're hearing from the Associated Press or some other sort of, source of calling races, you at home can take a look at the numbers and go, no, that race is definitely going there. And the reason I'm giving you this whole monologue is because I think Arizona can be called. I think people are waiting, and I don't necessarily know why. I think Mark Kelly is going to beat Masters, and I think that Kari Lake is going to lose as well. And I'm as surprised as anyone. I thought it would be much closer, but I think you've basically given the way that the votes came in early, I think you could probably, at least the Mark Kelly Blake Masters race, you can call. The Lake race has tightened up a bit, but the Kelly Masters race seems to be, Masters does not seem to have connected as well as Kari Lake has with some voters in Arizona.
How many votes are left there? 30%, 25%?
It's right now on the New York Times, it's 68% of the votes are in.
Right.
So we're about at 70%. So
there is a lot left. I mean, I don't know. I haven't been in depth into where those votes are in Arizona.
But again, you got to understand. You got to think what are the chances that the remaining votes are going to be dramatically different than the votes that are already in, and that's what I'm saying in terms of can you go ahead and call it? And again, I'm talking about for purposes, not for purposes of CBS. I'm talking about for betting.
Potentially some in-game wagering is what we're talking about, which I love.
It's still going on now. I mean, all these markets are still live. Arizona
still bet, absolutely.
Yeah, Arizona's about 90% for the Democrats. So maybe that is one of those situations where it's a nice bit of cheap money to make in a few hours, maybe. But people are still willing to take it. And if you take the Nevada market, that's been all over the place today. Like, people are interpreting and then reinterpreting where these votes are and how they will split. I saw about 85% Democrats earlier. Then just before I came on, it was down to 65. So there's still a lot of uncertainty.
Oh yeah, and Nevada still is legit too close to call. I don't think.
Yeah.
Even with as many votes as are in, you're going to be able, it was 75% in, and there's, say two or 3 points in between them. So that's, I think that is super.
And with that, that's also, I think, fair to note that that's what we think is in. I mean, I saw a lot of local Twitter here. I'm here in Las Vegas, here in Clark County, which is going to be the difference maker in one way or another in any election that's held. But is that number on? Is 75% of our 75% of the votes in, or whatever the number is at this point? I don't have it in front of me at this point, but is that, an accurate number? So you've got to, I think that's something worth keeping in mind. I think generally speaking, that's hopefully going to be an accurate number. Not so sure that's the case in Nevada. Yesterday was a very bumpy day and a very bumpy night. And then, Clark County saying, oh, we don't have enough people to count today, so we're not going to get this done until we'll get it done sometime Wednesday or Thursday. And it's like, okay, how do you know how accurate that number is? And by the way, totally off topic from betting, but it's only election day in a midterm that has had unbelievable amounts of money spent on it, an unbelievable run up. I'm not sure how you have a scheduling problem on election day, but that's just me here in Clark County observing that it's basically the Black Friday of the election season, of the midterms anyway, and you somehow didn't schedule enough people to work. I'm not buying it. But again, that's just me. I'll back off.
They may be having a hard time recruiting, man. Like
they could be.
You see people getting just stalked for their involvement in elections. I don't know if I would want to necessarily be part of that process, especially in like Washoe County where things are super contentious. So they may be having a recruiting issue over there in Nevada.
Well, that's something they could have identified months ago, I think.
Just gotta say, all of this, like, you guys might feel like, God, this is a bit embarrassing, showing the rest of the world how chaotic and long ongoing our elections are. This is half of the appeal for us. Right?
It's like me with gridlock. It's the appeal.
This business of still watching CNN like 24 hours later, watching the scoreboard counting down, it's become a cult thing. I mean, in 2020, it was huge because everybody was just watching that for days and days on end, and we were locked down at the time, so it was like, that's what we did. We stayed indoors and watched the American election results coming for 4
pulled
days.
Away from the Tiger King and got into something a little more resourceful.
Yeah.
What do you think the polls were getting wrong? Because there was a prediction of a wave, and now they're calling it the red ripple, which I don't know why it makes me hungry, but it does. How did that happen? Did they overestimate certain things? Was it a good thing that Democrats really focused on democracy being on the ballot, or a post-Dobbs reaction? What do you make of how sort of how the Republican wins were overestimated here?
I don't actually think it was the polls. I think it was just the narrative. I think people get carried away with the narrative. There was a little run in the polls where most of the polls going into 538 of Real Clear Politics were Republican funded. So there was a slight skew that way. And I just think, plus the general negativity about the Democrat message, about the failure to get an economic message through, the fact that if you look at the fundamentals of the election, the two big issues in polls clearly show were the economy and crime. And on both, the Republicans led. And it's midterm, and the Democrats are behind the generic ballot. You expect a red wave. All the conditions are there for a red wave. And thus that became the narrative. But if, we were talking about the forecasting sites in previous episodes, and they were pretty good. I mean, if you look through all those House races, right, the 50 closest House races, nearly all of them have called right, and they are hard ones to call. So I don't think I would necessarily condemn the policy. Another thing is that a lot of the contention that goes on here is in the build-up. When the polls closed, there wasn't much difference between the polls and the markets. It wasn't that different. It's more that the betting markets move ahead of time, as we discussed with, they saw the Fetterman dip, for example, coming. They saw Warnock's dip coming. because they're ahead of the polls. But also, you've also got people misread polls during that run-up. When there's like 8% undecided, to me, that's not really a poll. You know, if all these races we know is going to be 97, 98% between the two main parties. And it was only really in those final few days that the polls became, you know, where those undecideds really started getting filtered out. And at that point, it did start to look a bit better for the Democrats. I mean, the markets did move a little bit back towards them over the weekend. There was a general, like, maybe this is a bit of an overreaction. So I don't think it was really that far out on either one. I mean, you know, what we're saying, we're going to say, let's say they get 212 Democrats. That's 15 more seats than expected, and 1 or 2 more states than expected on the Senate. It's not that far out, is it?
Okay, yeah, no, I see your point that that it's sort of, as the election day got closer, there was more of a reality check, or that independents were breaking toward.
The incumbents were doing well, and that you know, just that the Democrats weren't collapsing. Like Fetterman hadn't fallen behind he may have gone back down to the level, but he hadn't fallen behind in Pennsylvania. That Warnock did start to get to 47, 48, 49 in some of these polls. I think it generally came around that. Regarding the Democrats' strategy, I mean, I think they've had an amazing result, considering they've run a bad campaign. Really, they've had an amazing result, and I just think that, betting wise, the big angle right now is backing Biden, because it's already come in a bit, because he was so dismissed prior to last night. He was out to 12.5% for the presidency. He's come in to sort of 14 today. I think that goes up to 20 really in the next couple of weeks, because he's had a good result. He's only lost 10, 11 seats. Trump lost 42. Obama lost 63 in the equivalent.
But do you think? I mean, I wonder if what the message is the Democrats here. Is it we're doing great, or is it Republicans have run some really crap candidates? Do you know what I mean? Like, was it a pro-Democrat showing, or was it an anti-Republican showing? Do you know what I mean? Like, in terms of, you wonder if Democrats see this and go, okay, great, well, let's just keep doing what we're doing, and in which case, you know, that, you know, some voters might say, hey, wait a minute, look, just because we voted for the Democrat doesn't mean we love everything that you're doing. We just thought that the person on the other side of the ticket was so unacceptable that we didn't vote for that person. Do you know what I mean? Like, how much of this is Biden going to be able to say, oh yeah, well, this is awesome?
Oh, I mean, I don't think he can, or that he really will. I think he'll just say it's a good result, business as usual. Let's get to work. Let's get things done. Right? That's what I'd tell him to say. I think that's roughly what he will say. I think you're absolutely right. That is what the mood of the country is. That's what the election story, the narrative actually is. That's why there were so many undecideds. You know, and as I said a couple of weeks ago, I was always skeptical about that red wave, because why weren't Republicans hitting 50? You know, in that situation where there's going to be a reaction against government, the other party should get 50. But there was 7-8% that were undecided, and I strongly suspect that amongst any Democrat share we talk about nowadays, certainly 2020, there's just a large number of people who are going to say, look, as long as the other side is Trump, as long as the other side is election deniers and mad conspiracy theories and white supremacists, I'm voting Democrat, even though they might disagree with, you know, the economic policies and everything else. And I think that is the takeaway. If the Republicans had gone in with a relatively middle of the road, inoffensive candidate without loads of personal baggage, they would have won all of those seats. They would have won Pennsylvania, they would have won Arizona, and then won the House by a bigger thing. I mean, one guy who's come in for a bit of money lately has been Glenn Youngkin in the governor of Virginia. Mm-hmm. And again, they took a big seat in Virginia last night, the Republicans. And you wonder, I mean, there's the thing. Maybe that's the way forward. Someone who doesn't, you know, provoke a fight with the other side every time he speaks.
Well, there is definitely some soul searching, it seems, among Republicans today who are saying, wait a minute, we have an unpopular president. We have sky high inflation, gas prices, crime. We are supposed to be the party that's better on all of this stuff. And yet we managed to not have a red wave. What are we doing wrong? And that's when sort of the fingers start pointing at Donald Trump. Although, who knows if he were not in the picture, what exactly would be going on? It seems like in some ways he's a symptom, and in some ways he's the issue. What about you, Patrick? What do you think the takeaways should be from the parties, given what we've seen here, this sort of all over the place, a historical, sort of election where we seem to be in the middle of?
Right, and I think you and Paul both make points that are spot on all of this. I think to Paul's point about how how this goes forward, and to your point really too about the acceptability, the winnability of candidates and so forth. I don't think the GOP wants to see a whole bunch of candidates that run toward the center. I don't think they want them way out wide right either, like a Buffalo Bills field goal back in the early 90s or whatever, when the Super Bowl was on the line. But here's the thing, and I saw this a couple of times today. DeSantis, and I don't know if this is still true because I know counting is still going on, but earlier today at least, DeSantis had won Florida by more than Newsom won California. Okay, if that doesn't adequately demonstrate the path forward for the GOP, then the Republicans are going to get a deserved loss in 2024. It's as simple as that. I think it clearly shows what GOP voters that will stick with GOP and not, as you noted, Melissa, undervote and just maybe skip a candidate or go libertarian or what have you. That's the kind of candidate they're looking for. And I think to Paul's point too, Youngkin may be that as well. I don't think Youngkin's the guy, but I could see why he at a low number. Because keep in mind, what Paul gets to do with Betfair is he can buy low, sell high. It's a trading market, which we don't have. I mean, we don't even have legal regulated betting on elections in the United States yet. Let alone we have a trading market that's kind of going right now, and we'll be more involved with politics, and we can talk more on that in coming weeks. There's one that's up and coming that looks really interesting to me, and potentially others. But it's still, not legal and regulated in the United States to bet on politics. I feel like, that's Youngkin might be a good buy low, potentially sell a little higher. But if you watched last night and saw how this all unfolded and saw how Florida was a runaway, but everything else overperforming runaway, people weren't saying DeSantis was going to win by 20 points, but he won by 20 points. And when you see that, and you see that that's not what's happening in a lot of these other races that people thought would be part of this red wave that now, as you noted, Melissa, may barely be a red ripple, you need to take stock of that. I think it'll be interesting to see how that happens. And again, as a bettor if you're a bettor on these issues and you see that Trump jumps in cannonball style and sucks up all the oxygen, then you know what? You should even look more seriously at Biden than Paul has indicated people are right now in a buy low, sell high situation. Or if you have to bet on it in standard betting terms, it's a bet at odds that are very palatable, and you can hedge on the other side if it gets crazy. Correct, Paul?
That's right. Everything about the betting for 2024 now should be that. It's thinking ahead, thinking where will the market be in 3 months, 6 months, a year? How many of these people were left in it? Because most of them won't be. So my feeling on it is really just that Biden could easily be the uncontested candidate here. If he announces in the new year he wants to do it, who's going to run against him, really? Right? Maybe AOC runs to start some trouble or cause some trouble or something, but no one is going to actually beat him. And in that case, well, you'd like to be on at 15%, wouldn't you, in a 2-horse race? I think that the race, that's an interesting thing. There's a market on which party will provide the president. At the moment, it's 57 to Republicans, 41 to the Democrats. I think that should be 50-50, really. I think the next election there's so much in play. I wouldn't really want to take a preference either way.
What would a DeSantis-Biden matchup look like? I think people feel like if Biden were up against Trump again, that Biden might be able to win again. But what if, let's go to imaginary land, what if it was Biden versus DeSantis?
Well, in that world, I make DeSantis favourite. Probably about 65-35, 67-33. But having said that, I'm not backing that up with any polling evidence. I mean, DeSantis isn't known to the whole country yet. There's a long way to go with that.
That's true.
But I also think that I mean, I see why DeSantis is favourite. I get it. I get the logic of it all. But look what's coming now. I mean, he's already been labelled Ron DeSanctimonious.
Which is weird. I mean,
It actually made me laugh. I must say that's genuinely.
He doesn't see. I mean, of all his faults, sanctimony doesn't seem to be the issue. No. Like I felt like, Trump. I felt like he's done better. Like Sleepy Joe, I thought, was a better.
That was a clever and crooked Hillary and crazy Bernie lying.
He kind of hit on some weaknesses there, and I felt like Ron DeSanctimonious was. I was like, do better, Trump.
Yeah, no, you're right. It isn't, but it's just a sign of what presumably he'll be back on Twitter within a couple of weeks, and therefore it will be back to the bully pulpit, just as he did with everybody else in 2016, and has done since. And I just wonder if I was Ron DeSantis, would I really even want that?
Well, I mean, and he said, if Trump runs, I'm not going to run against him because I don't want to. To your point, sort of get into this. I mean, this is kind of a mess. I mean, DeSantis is relatively young. So he's, he can wait to the next go around. There's no need to get in here now and get bloodied for no good reason. If Trump is going to be running. And weirdly, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but Donald Trump has indicated that he's got some kind of blackmail or something. Like now, I don't know that that's true, but I do know that that DeSantis hasn't been with improv. It was not. I don't know if that's true or not, but it does bring up a good point, which is that DeSantis is fairly untested nationally. Like he really hasn't had the spotlight on him. There could be things that we learn about him that do cause a problem down the road. So I mean, we're still sort of dealing with somebody who's not that well known on the national level, who has not had years of op research being done by very well funded progressive groups, and so who are probably gearing up right now to share all that information with us. So to your point, probably best to hold off on whether or not you're going to bet on him at this point, and wait until there's been a little more scrutiny on him as a potential.
Yeah, I would jump in on that though, and just note that DeSantis is taking the overwhelming, with the exception of the latest in the election season, he's taken the overwhelming number of arrows from the Democratic Party, and that's because the Democratic Party knows they want Donald Trump running for the Republicans. They damn well want it, and you know how you can tell. Look at how much money the Democratic Party put into funding Trump-backed candidates, supporting Trump-backed candidates in the midterms. They threw a ton of money at them. And then they had to cross their fingers and hope that a bunch of those people didn't get across the finish line, which they did not. But while they're saying democracy's on the ballot and these people are a threat to democracy and all that, they're funding these people and promoting these people endlessly. And they're going to do the same thing with Donald Trump. They want him on the ballot. Like I said, DeSantis has already taken a bunch of slings and arrows for all sorts of things between, COVID policy and, Florida being free and work, places of business open and, the battle with Disney and all that. He's taken a bunch of slings and arrows on this because the Democrats want him out of the way. They want Trump more than, as much as they say Trump is the worst thing ever for the country. I'm telling you 1000%, the Democrats want Trump on the ballot in 2024. And again, if you watched what happened last night and you're a political bettor like Paul, a political betting expert like Paul, and a political analyst like yourself, Melissa, and just a little bit more of a casual observer, but very, very interested like me, that should tell you where you need to put your money, I would think. I don't know if Paul would agree with that, but if that's how it shakes down, Paul's on the right track with where his money's going, I think.
I think my problem with backing either of them is that I think that this damages the Republican Party. I mean, this we could be about to have like 3-6 months of civil war over this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't do anyone any good. And they're now in a position where, because they haven't got the Senate, they're going to probably struggle to manage a divided caucus themselves in the House.
Mm-hmm.
And come 2024, the message you're going to have to sell is like, we've spent the last 2 years fighting amongst each other, really. And
it's not a good message to sell.
It's not good, no. And I do still think there is a chance. I would stick with my thing. I think Trump jumps in and then 2023 kills him. Legal cases, legal problems kill him. And that is what forces the Republican Party into having a proper primary, which DeSantis may win. He would certainly be the favourite, but I wouldn't.
And maybe DeSantis just sits on the sidelines and waits for that potential implosion.
Yeah, that's what I would.
And then it's like, okay,
I would.
I've got a ton of cash. Let's go. And the GOP would back the hell out of that. So bettors might too at that point. But until then, boy, follow Paul. He's the one who made money last night. So some money. Maybe he breaks even, but he's not losing money. It doesn't sound like. And he had a couple of key plays that certainly played out just as he had projected them over these past few weeks in these first few weeks of this of our Get Out the Bet podcast. So well played, sir.
Thank you. No, it was a good night. It was one thing I would say is it wasn't the betting bonanza that I thought it might be, because 4 years ago it was really, really busy. It was like a real all-night drama betting on that. Whereas actually by about kind of 3 a.m. here, 4 a.m., I was just watching the coverage really. Like there wasn't much happening. I'd had my bets. I could just monitor it quite. But still, it was a lot of. It was good to see so many other bookies opening up prices this time. It's when I first came to America, I'd never bet on a Senate or a bid or a House race. And people were asking, I totally don't know anything. So now, for it to be a global betting event, we're making progress.
Love it.
Well, you're welcome, world. We're glad we could provide you nail-biting
entertainment. We're glad America is an absolute shit. Sorry, I didn't say that.
And we'll keep providing
it's
entertainment
crazy,
going forward. We're going to wrap it up here for this podcast. Thanks so much for listening or watching this week. Don't forget to send us your questions at VegasInsider@bettercollective.com. And as a reminder, betting on politics is not permitted in the U.S. and is not permitted in some places in Europe. This podcast is informational only, and we encourage all the gamblers out there to check a variety of sources before placing your bet. Thanks again, and we will see you next week.